I'm Emily, 29, standing in a cramped hotel room, tugging at my thrifted dress before a millionaire's wedding. My hands shake a little, not from the cold, but from a text my sister Samantha just sent. "Hope you don't embarrass us, country girl." It's a jab, one of many, poking at my small-town Ohio roots. Those words sting, but I slip on my grandmother's worn heels, my anchor. Will her mockery ruin this day? Or will I rise above it? Have you ever been judged for being you? Drop a like if you felt this, and subscribe to hear how I faced it. Where are you watching from? I stepped out of the cab, my grandmother's heels clicking on the cobblestone path leading to the estate. The wedding venue loomed ahead, all glass and gold, with fountains spitting water into the June sky. I'm Emily, 29. And I felt like a sparrow in a peacock's den. Guests in silk and tailored suits glided past, their perfume thick enough to choke. My thrifted dress, a soft green I'd picked for its comfort, suddenly felt like a potato sack. I smoothed it down, my fingers catching on a loose thread at the hem. Not now, I thought, tucking it under. Samantha was waiting by the entrance, her blonde hair swept into a chignon, her navy dress screaming money. She's 32, my older sister, always the polished one. Her husband Greg stood beside her, his watch glinting like it cost more than my car. She spotted me and gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emily, you made it," she said, her voice syrupy. Then she leaned in, her breath warm against my ear. "Those shoes are quaint." Still wearing Grandma's relics, I forced a laugh, but my chest tightened. The heels, scuffed but polished, were my favorite thing I owned. They'd carried me through college job interviews, even my first pitch to investors. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but a woman in a lavender dress interrupted. "You must be Emily," she said, her voice kind but nervous. "I'm Clara Elise's cousin." "Champagne." She held out a flute, her hands trembling slightly. I took it, grateful for the distraction, and nodded. "Thanks. This place is something." Clara smiled, her round face softening. "It's overwhelming, right? I keep expecting to break something." She seemed genuine, a rare thing here. I sipped the champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue, and tried to relax. But Samantha wasn't done. She turned to a couple nearby, their faces stiff with Botox and privilege. "This is my sister, Emily," she said, her voice loud enough to carry. "Our farm girl from Ohio. You know, barns and all that." The man, Richard, chuckled, his teeth too white. "Really? Did you milk cows before you came?" His wife, Diane, smirked, her diamond earrings catching the light. "How charming," she said, "like I was a zoo exhibit." My face burned, but I kept my smile plastered on. "Just hay bales, no cows," I said, aiming for light, but my voice wobbled. Clara shifted beside me, her fingers tightening on her glass, but she stayed quiet. Inside, I was crumbling. Samantha and I grew up in the same small town, but she'd always hated it. She'd run to the city after high school, chasing skyscrapers and status, while I stayed building my tech startup in a basement. She never asked about it, just assumed I was stuck in the past. Her jabs weren't new, but hearing them here in front of strangers cut deeper. I glanced at Clara, hoping for an ally, but she was staring at her shoes, her cheeks pink. Greg chimed in, his voice smooth as oil. "Your gift's on the table, Emily. That wooden box? Very rustic." He smirked, and Samantha laughed, a sharp sound that made my stomach twist. I'd spent weeks carving that box, etching the couple's initials with care. It wasn't flashy, but it was me. I wanted to snap back to tell them my company was worth millions, that I could buy their whole lives twice over. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I excused myself, murmuring about needing air, and slipped toward the garden. The laughter followed me, Samantha's voice ringing above it all. I clutched my glass, my knuckles white, and wondered if coming here was a mistake. Clara caught up, her lavender dress swishing. "Don't let them get to you," she said softly. "They're just mean." I nodded, but the hurt was settling in heavy as stone. Samantha's next move, whatever it was coming, and I wasn't sure I could take it. I stood in the garden, the evening air cool against my flushed skin, Clara lingering a few steps behind. The chatter from the reception hall drifted out, a reminder I couldn't hide forever. My fingers brushed the locket under my dress, a silver oval my grandmother gave me when I was 12. It was my shield, but tonight it felt too small. I'm Emily, 29, and I was unraveling under my sister's sharp tongue. Clara cleared her throat. "You okay?" she asked, her voice tentative. I nodded, though my throat was tight. Just needed a second. The truth was, Samantha's words were clawing at old wounds. Growing up, she'd always been the golden child, the one our mother, Patricia, bragged about at church. I was the quiet one, tinkering with computers in the barn, dreaming of code instead of prom dresses. Samantha never let me forget it. Now in this glittering world, she was making sure everyone else remembered too. Clara fidgeted with her bracelet. "Samantha's intense," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But you don't seem like someone who'd let that slide." Her faith in me was sweet, but it stung too. I wasn't sure I had the fight in me tonight. Before I could respond, a shadow moved near the rose bushes. It was our mother, Patricia, her silver hair catching the string lights. She approached, her lips pursed like she'd sucked a lemon. "Emily, you're missing the appetizers," she said, her tone clipped. "And why are you out here with—" She glanced at Clara, dismissing her with a flick of her eyes. Clara shrank back, mumbling an excuse, and slipped away. I wanted to call her back, but Patricia was already talking. "You need to mingle, not sulk. Samantha's making connections. You could learn from her." I swallowed hard. "I'm fine, Mom. Just taking a breather." But she wasn't listening. She adjusted her shawl, her diamond ring flashing. "Your sister's gift was stunning," she said. "That vase so elegant. Everyone's talking about it." "Yours?" "Well, it's sweet, but it's not exactly—" She trailed off, but the word hung there enough. My carved wooden box, the one I'd poured my heart into, was just another thing to pity. My stomach twisted. Patricia had always done this, lifting Samantha up while brushing me aside. When I got into college on a scholarship, she'd said, "Nice, but Samantha's internship is with a senator." When I started my tech company, she'd called it a hobby. Now, standing in this garden, her words landed like a slap. I wanted to tell her about my startup, how it was worth millions, how I'd built it from nothing. But the words stuck heavy as mud. Instead, I said I worked hard on that box. My voice was small, and I hated it. Patricia sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "I know, dear, but this is a different world. You can't show up looking like you just left the farm." She glanced at my dress, the loose thread now a glaring flaw. "Try to fit in for once." I stared at her, my pulse loud in my ears. Fit in. As if I hadn't spent years proving I was more than my roots. As if my success hidden to keep their judgment at bay meant nothing. I opened my mouth, but footsteps crunched behind us. It was Greg, Samantha's husband. His tie loosened, a glass of whiskey in hand. "There you are," he said, his grin too wide. "Samantha's asking for you, Emily. Something about the gift table. She's got a little surprise planned." His tone was playful, but his eyes gleamed with something sharp. My heart sank. Samantha's surprises were never kind. I remembered her 16th birthday when she'd accidentally spilled juice on my new sweater in front of her friends, laughing as I blushed. This felt bigger, crueler. Patricia smiled, oblivious. "Go on, Emily. Don't keep your sister waiting." She turned back to the hall, leaving me with Greg's smirk. I followed him inside, my legs heavy. The reception hall was a blur of crystal and candlelight guests, clinking glasses, their laughter grating. Clara was nowhere in sight, and I felt alone, exposed. Samantha stood by the gift table, her posture perfect, a small crowd gathered around her. She saw me and waved her smile ablade. "Emily." Just in time, she called, her voice carrying. "We're about to show off the gifts. You won't want to miss this." Her words were sugar, but her eyes promised poison. My chest tightened, the air too thick to breathe. Whatever she had planned, it was meant to cut deep, and I wasn't sure I could dodge it. The reception hall felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with perfume and pretense. "I'm Emily, 29, and my sister Samantha's voice sliced through the chatter, pulling every eye to the gift table. She stood there radiant in her navy dress, her smile a trap. I hovered at the edge of the crowd, my hands clammy. Greg's warning about her surprise looping in my head. The carved wooden box I'd made sat among glittering packages, looking small and out of place, just like me. Samantha clapped her hands, drawing attention. "Let's start with mine," she said, her tone bright but edged. She lifted her gift, a crystal vase that caught the candlelight like a prism. The crowd murmured approval, and she basked in it, her eyes flicking to me. "It's from Paris," she added, "perfect for Elise's new home." Elise, the bride, smiled graciously, but I caught her glance at my box, curious. I shifted my dress, catching on my thigh, where the thread had unraveled further. I wanted to disappear, but Samantha's gaze pinned me. She set her vase down and gestured to my gift. "And here's Emily's contribution," she said, her voice dripping with mock warmth. "Go on, Elise, open it." The crowd turned their faces, a mix of amusement and pity. Richard, the smug guest from earlier, leaned to Diane, whispering something that made her smirk. Elise hesitated, then lifted my box, her fingers tracing the carved initials. "This is beautiful," she said softly, but Samantha cut in before she could finish. "Oh, it's so rustic," she said, her laugh sharp. "What is it, Emily, firewood for their penthouse?" The room erupted in chuckles, and my face burned. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Clara, standing nearby, tried to help. "Handmade gifts are special," she said, her voice shaky. Samantha rolled her eyes. "Clara, please." "It's naive to think that fits here." I felt like I was shrinking, my chest tight with a mix of shame and fury. Clara's cheeks flushed, and she stepped back silenced. I wanted to defend her, to defend myself, but the laughter was deafening. My box wasn't just a gift. It was weeks of late nights sanding wood until my hands blistered, pouring love into something real. And Samantha had turned it into a punchline. Then I heard a familiar sigh from the crowd. It was our mother, Patricia, standing with Diane, her lips pursed in that disappointed way I knew too well. She leaned toward Diane, her voice low but clear. "I told Emily to get something nicer," she said. "She's always been stubborn." Diane nodded, her earrings glinting as she whispered back. The words hit like a punch, tearing open a wound I'd carried since childhood. Patricia had never believed in me, not when I fixed our old tractor at 15, not when I taught myself to code, not now. My hands shook, and I shoved them into my pockets, feeling the locket under my dress. My grandmother's voice echoed, "Your worth isn't in their eyes." But it wasn't enough to block the pain. Samantha was orchestrating this, and Patricia was letting her. I scanned the room for an escape, my eyes landing on Greg, who raised his whiskey glass in a mock toast, his grin saying he was in on the game. I took a step back, my heel catching on the polished floor. I needed airspace, anything to stop the room from closing in. Clara caught my eye, her expression full of sympathy, but it only made me feel more exposed. I turned toward the garden doors, but Samantha's voice stopped me cold. "Oh, Emily, don't run off," she called, her tone teasing. "We're just getting started." The crowd tittered, and I froze, my heart pounding. Whatever she had planned next, it was going to hurt worse. I stood, rooted to the floor, Samantha's teasing words hanging in the air like smoke. The reception hall's chandeliers cast harsh light, making my skin prickle. I'm Emily, 29, and every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The crowd's eyes bored into me, their amusement a weight I couldn't shake. Samantha stepped closer to the gift table, her movements deliberate like a cat circling prey. "Let's keep the fun going," she said, her voice honeyed but venomous. "Emily's gift deserves a proper spotlight." She lifted my wooden box again, holding it up like a prop. "This," she said, pausing for effect, "is what you get when you're stuck in the sticks." The laughter came faster this time, sharper, cutting through the clink of glasses. Richard's guffaw was loudest, his face red from wine and glee. Diane leaned into him, whispering, her eyes never leaving me. I felt naked, my thrifted dress a flimsy shield against their stares. Elise, the bride, shifted uncomfortably, her hands clasped tight. "It's thoughtful," she said, her voice barely audible, but Samantha waved her off. "Oh, Elise, you're too kind," she said. "This is just Emily being Emily." Bless her heart. The phrase, a southern dagger dressed in sweetness, landed like a slap. My throat burned, and I dug my nails into my palms, fighting the urge to cry. I'd heard that phrase growing up always from Samantha when she wanted to wound without witnesses. I scanned the room, desperate for an anchor. Clara was half hidden behind a pillar, her lavender dress a soft blur. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," but it didn't help. My mother, Patricia, stood near the bar now, sipping a martini, her face a mask of indifference. She met my gaze for a split second, then looked away as if I were a stranger. That hurt worse than Samantha's words. I'd spent years chasing her approval only to be dismissed in front of this glittering crowd. Greg sauntered over, his whiskey glass empty now. "You're a good sport, Emily," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Not everyone can pull off this." He gestured vaguely at my dress, my shoes, my everything. The crowd tittered, and my stomach churned. I wanted to scream that my company had just gone public, that I'd built an empire from a laptop in a hayloft. But the words stayed locked inside, choked by fear of their disbelief, their mockery. Samantha set my box down with exaggerated care, like it might break the table. "Let's raise a glass," she said, grabbing a champagne flute, "to sophistication and to those who—" "Well, try." The room laughed again, glasses clinking in a toast that felt like a funeral. I stood frozen, my vision blurring. Every jab, every smirk was a brick piling on my chest. I remembered Samantha's old tricks, stealing my diary to read at a sleepover, blaming me for her broken curfew. But this was different, public, calculated. I turned to leave my heels scraping the floor, but a new voice stopped me. It was Henry Elise's uncle, a weathered man in a plain suit. "I like your box," he said gruffly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Reminds me of home." A few guests paused, but Samantha laughed it off. "Oh, Henry, you're too sweet," she said. "But let's not get sentimental." The crowd followed her lead, dismissing him, and my brief hope flickered out. I slipped into the garden, the cool air a shock against my burning face. My hands trembled as I leaned against a stone bench, the sounds of the party muffled but relentless. Clara followed her steps, hesitant. "You don't deserve this," she said, her voice thick with anger. "Why do they do this?" I shook my head, unable to answer. The pain was too raw, too deep, and Samantha's next move was coming. I could feel it, heavy and inevitable, waiting to crush me. The garden's quiet was a lie, the party's hum seeping through the hedges like a pulse. I'm Emily, 29, and my heart was a drum, each beat louder as I forced myself back to the reception hall. Clara's words, her quiet rage trailed me, but they couldn't dull the dread. Samantha's game wasn't over, and I was walking into her trap. The gift presentation was starting, and my wooden box, my heart carved into cedar, was about to be her final punchline. Inside, the crowd buzzed, gathered around a long table draped in white linen. Elise stood at the center, her ivory gown glowing under the chandeliers. Samantha was beside her holding court, her champagne flute raised like a scepter. I slipped in near the back, my hands slick with sweat, my dress's torn hem catching on my calf. Greg spotted me and smirked, leaning to whisper to a man in a pinstripe suit. Their laughter stung, fresh and raw. The MC, a wiry man with a booming voice, took the microphone. "Time to celebrate the couple with your gifts," he said, his grin too wide. "Samantha, you're up first." She stepped forward, her movements fluid, and unveiled her crystal vase again, its facets throwing rainbows across the room. For Elise and Tom, she said, her voice velvet, "A touch of elegance for your new life." The crowd clapped Richard's hands loudest, his wife Diane nodding like it was a coronation. Elise smiled, her eyes warm but tired. "It's stunning," she said, and Samantha soaked it in her gaze, sliding to me. I felt the room shrink, every eye a spotlight. The MC called my name next, and my stomach dropped. "Emily, let's see your gift," he said, oblivious to the tension. I stepped forward, my legs jelly, and lifted my box from the table. Its weight felt heavier now, the carved initials rough under my fingers. "This is for you," I said to Elise, my voice thin but steady. "I made it myself with your initials. It's for keepsakes memories." Elise's face softened, her hands reaching for it. "It's beautiful, Emily," she said, her voice genuine. For a moment, I thought I'd survived. Then Samantha laughed, a sharp, deliberate sound that silenced the room. "Made it yourself," she said, her tone mocking. "What in your barn, did you whittle it with a pocket knife?" The laughter was instant, a wave crashing over me. Richard's voice boomed, charming for a barn wedding. Diane's giggle was high and cruel, and others joined, their faces blurring into a wall of scorn. My chest burned, my breath shallow. I gripped the box, my knuckles white, and looked at Clara, who was clapping fiercely, her eyes fierce with support. But it wasn't enough. The room was drowning me. Then Patricia's voice cut through, low and sharp from the crowd's edge. "I warned her to buy something proper," she said to a woman in a red dress. "She never listens." The betrayal was a knife twisting deep. My mother, who'd brushed off my dreams since I was a kid, was burying me in front of strangers. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were glued to the floor, my heart racing so fast I thought it'd burst. Samantha stepped closer, her smile a blade. "Come on, Emily," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Tell us about your little craft project. Did you glue it together with hay?" The crowd roared, and my vision blurred tears. I refused to let fall, stinging my eyes. Every jab, every slight from our childhood, her stealing my spotlight, her sneers at my tech obsession flooded back a tidal wave of pain. I was done broken, and she knew it. Samantha's words hung in the air, a venom that silenced even the clinking glasses. "I'm Emily, 29, and the reception hall felt like a cage, every laugh a bar slamming shut. My wooden box trembled in my hands, its carved edges biting into my palms. Elise's eyes flickered with unease, but she stayed quiet, her hands clasped tight. The crowd's amusement was a living thing feeding on my humiliation, and Samantha was its conductor, her smile sharp as glass. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Don't take it personally, Emily," she said, loud enough for the front row to hear. "You're just our little country bumpkin trying so hard." The phrase ripped through me, a childhood taunt now weaponized for all to see. The laughter swelled, Richard's booming chuckle mixing with Diane's high-pitched cackle. A woman in a sequined gown nudged her date, pointing at my dress, its torn hem now a beacon of my shame. I looked to Clara, desperate for an anchor, but she was frozen, her hands twisting her bracelet, her eyes wet with second-hand pain. Henry, the farmer uncle, cleared his throat, his face red with anger, but Samantha's glare silenced him before he could speak. My mother, Patricia, stood stone-faced by the bar, her martini untouched, her silence louder than any insult. She'd chosen her side long ago, and it wasn't mine. Greg raised his glass, his voice cutting through the noise. To real success, he said, his eyes locked on me, and to those who... Well, keep it simple. The toast was a dagger, implying I was nothing, nobody in this world of wealth. The crowd clinked glasses, their approval a chorus of betrayal. My startup, my millions, my nights coding until dawn, they didn't know. And Samantha made sure they never would. I was just the farm girl, the joke, the failure. Elise opened my box, her fingers careful, and pulled out the note I'd tucked inside. To Elise and Tom, she read aloud, her voice soft. May your love hold every memory. Her eyes glistened, and for a fleeting second, I thought she'd save me. But Samantha snorted, breaking the moment. Sentimental, she said, drawing out the word like it was poison. Perfect for a scrapbook, not a wedding. The crowd laughed again, and Elise's face fell, her kindness buried under the weight of their scorn. My knees buckled, but I caught myself on the table, the linen rough under my fingers. My heart was a wildfire burning through every defense I'd built. I wanted to scream my truth, to tell them my company was worth more than their mansions combined. But my voice was gone, stolen by years of Samantha's jabs, Patricia's neglect, this room's cruelty. I was drowning in their laughter, my worth reduced to a tattered dress and a handmade box. A guest I didn't know, a man with a slick mustache, called out, "Does it come with a pitchfork?" The room roared, and my vision blurred, the chandeliers spinning above. Clara stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Stop it," she said, but it was a whisper against their tide. Samantha's eyes gleamed victorious as she raised her glass again. I stood there, broken open, every scar from my past bleeding for all to see, with no way out. The laughter clung to me like damp cloth, the reception hall, a blur of glittering cruelty. I'm Emily, 29, and my hands shook, still clutching the table's edge, my wooden box now back in Elise's hands. Samantha's toast echoed her country bumpkin label, a brand on my skin. But something snapped inside, a quiet fracture, like a seed splitting under soil. I wasn't done. Not yet. My eyes found Clara's, her tear-streaked face, a mirror of my pain, and her small nod lit a spark. I straightened my spine, steeling despite the weight of their stares. The microphone sat on the table a few feet away, its black cord coiled like a challenge. My breath hitched, but I stepped toward it, my heels clicking on the polished floor. The crowd's chatter faltered, heads turning. Samantha's smile froze her champagne flute mid-air. Greg's smirk faded, his glass lowering. Even Patricia by the bar paused, her eyes narrowing. I reached the microphone and tapped it, the soft thud cutting through the room. My voice, when it came, was steady, though my heart raced. "Elise," I said, looking at the bride, whose eyes widened with surprise. "Thank you for welcoming me tonight. Your kindness means more than you know." Elise smiled, a real smile, and it anchored me. I turned to Samantha, my gaze unflinching. "And Samantha, you call me country, but I've built something you can't even dream of." The room went still, a collective intake of breath. Richard shifted, his laugh dying in his throat. Diane's hand froze on her necklace. I kept going, my voice growing stronger. "I started a tech company in my basement in Ohio," I said. "Nights, coding days, pitching, years of no sleep. It's worth $100 million now." The words landed like stones, heavy and real. Samantha's face paled, her glass trembling. Greg blinked, his jaw slack. I pulled my phone from my clutch, my finger steady despite the adrenaline. "Here," I said, opening a news article about my IPO, the headline, "Bold Ohio Startup Hits Billion-Dollar Valuation." I held it up, the screen glowing. "This is me. Not a bumpkin, not a joke." I passed the phone to Elise, who took it, her eyes scanning the text. She gasped, soft but audible, and handed it to Tom, her groom. The crowd murmured, heads craning. Clara clapped a lone sound that grew as Elise joined in, her hands quick and earnest. Henry, the farmer uncle, nodded from the back, his weathered face proud. But Samantha's eyes burned her lips a thin line. "You're lying," she said, her voice sharp but unsteady. "You're making this up to save face." Greg nodded, trying to rally. "Yeah, sounds convenient," he said, but his bravado was thin, the crowd's doubt shifting. I shook my head, my voice calm but firm. "I hid it because I didn't need your approval, but I'm done letting you rewrite who I am." My words were for Samantha, but they were for Patricia too, who stood rigid, her martini forgotten. I saw her flinch a crack in her armor, but I didn't stop. I turned to Clara, whose tears had dried her smile fierce. "People like Clara know what kindness looks like," I said. "That's worth more than any vase." The room was a mix of shock and whispers, guests leaning to neighbors' phones, slipping out to search my name. Elise stepped forward, her hand on my arm. "Emily, I had no idea," she said, her voice warm. "Your box, your story, it's incredible." Her words were a lifeline, but Samantha's glare was a storm brewing worse. I stood tall, my truth finally free, but the air crackled with what came next. The whispers grew a low hum, filling the reception hall. But I stood firm, the microphone cool in my hand. "I'm Emily, 29, and for the first time, I wasn't hiding." Samantha's accusation hung unanswered. Her face a mask of disbelief, but I didn't flinch. My truth was out, a weight lifted, though the room still crackled with tension. Elise handed my phone to a guest who passed it along, the article's glow spreading like a ripple. Faces changed, some curious, some uneasy, others calculating. I turned to Patricia, my mother, whose eyes darted away, her fingers tight around her martini glass. "You always said I'd never make it," I said, my voice low but clear, cutting through the murmurs. "You called my work a phase, my dreams childish. But I built this, Mom, without you." Her lips parted, a weak protest forming, but I raised a hand. "No, I'm not your disappointment anymore." The crowd stilled, the air heavy with my words. Patricia's face crumpled, a flicker of guilt breaking through her polished facade. I didn't wait for her response. I looked at Samantha, whose hands were clenched, her perfect poise cracking. "You wanted to shame me," I said, "but you don't get to define me. Not tonight, not ever." My voice was steady, each word a brick in a wall I was finally building around myself. Clara stepped forward, her lavender dress catching the light, and squeezed my hand. "You're incredible," she whispered, her voice thick with pride. Her support was a spark fueling me to keep going. I faced the crowd, my chin high. "I came here to celebrate love," I said, nodding to Elise and Tom. "But I'm leaving with something better, my own respect." Elise's eyes shone, and she clapped slow at first, then faster, pulling others in. Henry joined, his rough hands loud, and soon half the room was applauding, a tide turning. Samantha scoffed, trying to regain control. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice shrill. "You're turning a wedding into your soapbox." But her words fell flat, the crowd's attention split. Greg tugged her arm, muttering something, but she yanked away, her eyes blazing. Richard, the smug guest, cleared his throat, his earlier mockery gone. "Well, that's, impressive," he said, his tone grudging. Diane nodded, her smile forced, and I saw the shift respect, or at least fear, replacing their scorn. I set the microphone down, its weight no longer mine to carry. My chest felt lighter, like I'd exhaled a breath held for years. I thought of my grandmother, her locket warm against my skin, her voice in my head. Stand tall, Emily. I was. Not for them, but for me. I walked back to Clara, who hugged me tight, her bracelet pressing into my arm. You did it, she said, and I knotted my throat too tight to speak. Elise approached, her gown rustling, and took my hands. Your gift means everything, she said, her voice soft. And so do you. She glanced at my box now on the table, its simplicity a quiet defiance. I smiled, a real one, feeling the room's eyes soften, some still skeptical, others awed. Samantha stood rigid, her arms crossed, but I didn't care. I'd claimed my space, my story, my worth. I stepped back, my heels steady on the floor, and caught Patricia's gaze. She looked small, her shoulders hunched, and for a moment I saw her regret. But I didn't need her now. I turned away, my hand brushing Clara's arm, and walked toward the garden doors. The crowd parted, their whispers fading. Outside, the night air waited cool and clean, and I paused, my breath slow, my eyes steady. I was enough. I stepped into the garden, the night air sharp against my skin, the party's hum fading behind me. I'm Emily, 29, and my pulse still thrummed from speaking my truth. The reception hall's lights spilled through the windows, casting long shadows across the stone path. I'd laid bare my success, my $100 million company, and the room had shifted, some clapping, others stunned. But now alone, the weight of what I'd done settled in heavy and uncertain. Inside, the music started again, a slow waltz that felt worlds away. I leaned against a low wall, my hands brushing the cool moss, and let my breath steady. Clara's hug, Elise's words, the crowd's applause. They were real, but they didn't erase the rawness in my chest. I'd exposed my secret not just to Samantha and Patricia, but to strangers who'd laughed at me minutes before. What came next was anyone's guess. Footsteps crunched behind me, and I turned to see Patricia, her silver hair glinting under the string lights. Her face was tight, her shawl pulled close despite the mild June night. Emily? She said, her voice low, almost a whisper. You should have told me. Her words weren't an apology, more an accusation, like I'd betrayed her by succeeding in secret. I met her eyes, searching for warmth, but found only a flicker of envy, sharp and cold. I said, my voice even. You never listened. She flinched, her lips parting, but no words came. Instead, she adjusted her ring, the diamond catching the light, a nervous habit I'd seen since childhood. Your father would have been proud, she said finally, but it felt hollow, a line rehearsed for someone else's story. I knotted my throat tight and looked away. She lingered, then turned back to the hall, her heels clicking softly, leaving me with nothing but silence. The garden felt smaller now, the roses' scent too sweet. I walked further, my shoes sinking into the grass, and found a bench under a willow tree. I sat, my dress fanning out, and noticed a new tear near the knee, a small rebellion against this polished world. Before I could process it, Clara appeared, her lavender dress slightly wrinkled, her face alight with something new. Emily, I need to tell you something, she said, sitting beside me, her words tumbling fast. I've always wanted to open a bakery, she said, her eyes bright. But I was scared, thought I'd fail. Watching you tonight standing up like that, it changed something. I'm going to do it. Her voice was fierce, and I smiled, warmth breaking through my numbness. You will, I said, and I'll help you, whatever you need. Her jaw dropped, then she laughed, a sound so pure it eased the ache in my chest. "You're serious?" she asked, and I nodded, already picturing her shop flour-dusted counters and all. But the moment shattered as Richard approached, his suit crisp, his smile oily. "Emily," a word he said, not waiting for my answer. "Your company sounds promising. I've got investors who'd love to meet you. We could make real money." His tone was all business, his earlier mockery forgotten, replaced by greed. I stared at him, my stomach turning. "I'm not interested," I said, my voice flat. He blinked, unused to refusal, and pressed harder. "Don't be hasty. This is big leagues." I stood, brushing grass from my dress. "I'm already there," I said, and walked away, Clara following her silence loud with respect. Back near the hall, I saw Samantha through the window, her arms crossed, talking to Greg in hushed, angry tones. She hadn't approached me, hadn't spoken since my speech, and her absence was a wound all its own. I'd expected her to fight, to lash out, but this quiet was worse. A storm held back. The crowd inside danced oblivious, but I felt their eyes still, some curious others, wary my revelation. A stone dropped in their perfect pond. I stopped at the garden's edge, the music swelling behind me, and felt the world pause. My truth had changed everything, but the cost was still unfolding, and I wasn't ready for what it might demand. The garden's edge felt like a threshold, the reception hall's glow, a distant world I no longer fit. I'm Emily, 29, and my revelation hung heavy, its echoes reshaping the night. Clara walked beside me, her steps light, her dream of a bakery, now a shared spark between us. But the weight of Samantha's silence, Patricia's retreat, and the crowd's shifting eyes pressed against me, a tide I couldn't outrun. I paused by a fountain, its soft gurgle mocking the chaos inside me. A text buzzed my phone, the screen cold in my hand. It was Samantha. "You had to make it about you, didn't you?" Always the victim. I stared at the words, each one a needle. No apology, no pause, just blame, sharp and familiar. I typed back, my fingers deliberate. "Look in the mirror. Sam, reflect on why you need to hurt me." I hit send, my breath shallow, knowing she wouldn't reply. She never did when cornered. Clara noticed my face and touched my arm. "You okay?" she asked, her voice muffled. I nodded, but the truth was, I felt unmoored, my courage from the microphone fading into doubt. Had I said too much? Exposed too much? The crowd's applause was gone, replaced by a new kind of scrutiny. I glanced through the hall's windows, catching glimpses of guests now whispering their phones out my name, likely trending in their small, gilded circles. Henry Elise's uncle approached, his boots scuffing the path. "You did good, kid," he said, his voice rough but warm. "Your grandma'd be proud. That box of yours, it's got soul." He handed me a small wooden carving, a tiny sparrow, its wings half spread. "Made it this morning," he said. "Thought you might like it." I took at the wood smooth against my palm, and my throat tightened. "Thank you," I whispered, clutching it like a lifeline. But the warmth didn't last. Greg appeared, his tie askew, his face a mix of irritation and forced charm. "Quite a show, Emily," he said, his voice loud enough to draw eyes from the hall. "But let's not ruin the night." "Yeah, Samantha's upset." He stepped closer, his cologne sharp. "You don't need to play the martyr." I met his gaze, my voice ice. "I'm not playing anything, Greg. I'm just done pretending." He blinked, unaccustomed to my edge, and backed off, muttering under his breath. Inside, the dancing continued, but the mood had shifted. Guests who'd laughed at me now avoided my eyes, their smiles tight when I passed. A woman in a velvet dress approached, her voice hesitant. "I read about your company," she said. "It's inspiring." But her tone was cautious, like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. I thanked her. My words clipped, and moved on, feeling their curiosity like a spotlight I hadn't asked for. Elise found me near the dessert table, her face soft with gratitude. "Your note in the box," she said, "it made me cry. You're more than they realize." Her words were kind, but they stung too, a reminder of how invisible I'd been. I smiled, my chest aching, and excused myself, needing space. Samantha was still inside her navy dress, a dark blur among the dancers, her laughter forced now, her control slipping. I slipped back to the garden, the sparrow carving tight in my fist. My phone stayed silent. Samantha's text, unanswered, Patricia's absence, a void. The night felt fragile, my triumph laced with loss. I'd claimed my truth, but it had fractured something deeper. And I stood there alone, the fountain's murmur, the only sound, my heart, quiet, heavy, waiting for what I'd broken to settle. I'm Emily, 29, and the hotel room's quiet wrapped around me like a soft blanket, the city's glow seeping through the window. The wedding was over, its chaos left behind at the estate, but my heart still carried its weight. I sat on the edge of the bed, my thrifted dress folded in my suitcase, replaced by a worn sweatshirt and jeans. The night outside hummed distant car horns, blending with my thoughts, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe. I pulled out the small wooden sparrow Henry had given me, its tiny wings catching the lamplight. It felt alive in my palm, a piece of something solid, grounded. I set it on the nightstand and opened my journal, its pages crinkled from months of neglect. My pen hovered, then moved, words spilling out. I told them who I am. Not for them, but for me. The act of writing felt like untangling a knot, each sentence a step toward clarity. The room's radiator clicked a steady rhythm, and I leaned back, my eyes tracing the ceiling's faint cracks. I thought of my childhood, not the pain of Samantha's jabs or Patricia's coldness, but the mornings I'd spent with my grandmother, picking blackberries by the creek. She'd hum old hymns, her hands stained purple, and tell me stories of women who built lives from nothing. "You've got that fire, Emily," she'd say, her eyes bright. I'd forgotten how much those moments shaped me, how they'd carried me through years of doubt. My phone buzzed, a text from Clara lighting up the screen. "Thank you for believing in me. Let's talk bakery plans soon." I smiled, my chest warming. Her courage, sparked by mine, was a gift I hadn't expected. I typed back, "Absolutely. You're going to shine." The words felt true, not just for her, but for me too. I'd spent so long hiding my success, fearing it would alienate me further, but sharing it tonight had cracked something open, letting light in. I stood and walked to the window, the city sprawling below, a maze of lives I'd never know. I thought about my company, the late nights coding in my Ohio basement, the first investor who'd believed in me. I'd built it to prove I could, but now I saw it differently, a tool, not a shield. I wanted to use it to lift up people like Clara, to fund dreams that others dismissed. The idea settled in me, quiet but firm, like a seed taking root. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find the hotel's night clerk, a young woman with tired eyes holding a small package. "This came for you," she said, handing me a padded envelope. I thanked her and closed the door. My fingers tracing the sender's name, Elise. Inside was a note, her handwriting neat. Your box is on our mantel. It's the heart of our home. Thank you, Emily. I held the note, my eyes stinging, and set it beside the sparrow, 2 tokens of a night I'd never forget. I sat again, my journal open, and wrote one more line. I'm enough. The words looked small on the page, but they felt vast, a truth I was finally claiming. The city's hum faded, and I closed my eyes, my breath slow, the world soft and still, holding me in its pause. The hotel room's stillness held me, the lamplight soft on the sparrow carving, and Elise's note. I'm Emily, 29, and the night felt like a bridge carrying me from the wedding storm to something quieter, truer. I picked up my journal again, its leather cover worn from years of secrets, and flipped to a blank page. My pen moved slowly, tracing thoughts I hadn't dared voice. I don't need their love to be whole. The words settled in me solid as stone. I stood and opened the window, letting the city's cool air slip in, carrying faint traces of exhaust and summer blooms. My sweatshirt sleeve brushed my wrist, a comfort I'd chosen over the dress that had frayed under scrutiny. I thought of my grandmother's farm, the way the dawn would paint the fields gold, her voice calling me to breakfast. She'd taught me to listen to the quiet, to find strength in it. Tonight, I was learning that again. My phone lit up a call from Patricia, her name stark on the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering, then answered. Emily, she said, her voice thin, unsteady. I didn't know you'd done so much. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was more than she'd ever offered. I leaned against the windowsill, the city sprawling below. I needed to do it for me. I said my words, calm, no anger left. Not for you to see. She was quiet, the line crackling with her unspoken thoughts. Can we talk when you're back? She asked finally. I closed my eyes, picturing her face, the lines etched by years of favoring Samantha. Maybe I said, but I need time. I hung up my hand, steady the decision, a line drawn in sand. I wasn't closing the door, but I wasn't rushing through it either. I was choosing myself first. I sat back on the bed, pulling the sparrow into my palm. Its wings, half-carved, seemed ready to lift a promise of flight. I thought of Clara's bakery, the scholarship I wanted to start for rural girls chasing tech dreams. My wealth wasn't just numbers in a bank. It was a chance to build, to give others the freedom I'd fought for. The idea felt like a seed, small but alive, ready to grow. A breeze stirred the curtains, and I looked out at the city again, its lights pulsing like heartbeats. I didn't need Samantha's approval or Patricia's pride. I didn't need the crowd's applause or Richard's greedy offers. I'd spent years proving my worth to them, but now I saw it clear my worth was mine, always had been. My grandmother knew that, and she'd left me her fire burning steady in my bones. I tucked the sparrow into my pocket, its edges smooth against my fingers, and closed my journal. The room was quiet, the city's hum, a distant lullaby. I lay back, my breath, even my heart slow. The world felt wide, not heavy, and I was ready to walk into it not as a victor, but as me whole, enough, and free. The night held me close, and I let it, my eyes drifting shut, the stillness, a gift I finally accepted. I'm Emily, 29, and the Ohio sun spills across my grandmother's farm, warming the porch, where I sit with a mug of coffee. It's been a month since the wedding, and the world feels different, quieter, like the earth after a storm. The fields stretch wide, green, and alive, their rustle a song I've known since I was a girl. I'm in a flannel shirt, my boots dusty from a morning walk, and for the first time in years, I'm not running from myself. The farm is mine now, a gift left in my grandmother's will. Its weathered barn and creaky fences, a map of my roots. I've been coming out here every weekend, tending the garden, fixing the old gate, letting my hands work while my mind settles. This morning, I planted lavender by the mailbox, its scent sharp and clean, a small act that feels like claiming my place. The work is slow, deliberate, and it's teaching me patience, something I'd lost under the weight of ambition. My phone sits on the porch rail, its screen dark. Samantha sent an email last week, short but softer than I expected. I was wrong, Emily. I'm sorry. Jealousy's a hard thing to admit. I read it twice, then set it aside, not ready to reply. Forgiveness isn't a switch I can flip, but I'm not angry anymore. I'm just here breathing, letting time do its work. Patricia called once, her voice halting, asking to visit. I said soon, but not yet. I need this space, this ground to anchor me first. Clara's been texting her messages full of sketches for her bakery's logo, each one braver than the last. I wired her a small investment yesterday, enough to lease a storefront, and her thank you call made me laugh harder than I have in months. "You're my hero," she said, and I shook my head, but the words stuck. I'm no hero, just someone who's learning to share what she's built, to let her wealth mean something beyond a bank account. I sip my coffee, its bitterness grounding, and watch a hawk circle above the fields. My company hums along without me hovering, my team handling the daily grind. I've started sketching plans for a community center here, a place for kids to learn coding, to dream bigger than their circumstances. It's not grand, just a seed, but it feels right, like a promise I'm making to the girl I used to be, the one who felt too small for the world. The porch creaks under my weight, and I lean back, my eyes tracing the horizon. The wedding feels distant now, its pain softened by time and choice. I'm not the woman who stood shaking in that reception hall, nor the girl who hid her light to keep peace. I'm something new, carved slowly like the wood I used to shape. The lavender's scent drifts up, and I close my eyes, my breath steady the past, a quiet hum I no longer need to fight. The afternoon sun dips low, painting the farm's fields in amber, and I stand by the barn, a hammer in hand, nailing a loose board back into place. I'm Emily, 29, and this work, simple and steady, feels like stitching my soul together. The air carries a hint of cut grass, and I pause, my hands sore but satisfied, to watch the horizon settle into dusk. The world is soft here, and I'm learning to be soft with myself too. I think of Samantha's email still unanswered, and Patricia's call still unreturned. I don't hate them, not anymore. I see them clearer now, flawed, human, caught in their own cages of pride and expectation. I've chosen to let go, not because they deserve it, but because I do. Holding on to anger was like carrying stones in my pockets. Dropping them has made me lighter, free to walk my own path. I'm not rushing to mend those ties, but I'm open to it when the time feels right. Clara's bakery is taking shape, her first oven ordered, and I've been sketching more for the community center, a space where kids can build dreams without shame. These acts, small as they seem, are my rebellion against a world that tried to shrink me. I used to think success was about proving others wrong, but now I know it's about living true to the girl who loved these fields, who coded in the dark, who dared to stand up in a room full of scorn. I walk to the creek behind the barn, its water clear over smooth stones, and kneel to dip my fingers in. The cold shocks me awake, a reminder of how alive I am. My wealth, my company, they're tools, not my worth. My worth is in the way I choose to show up, kind, steady, whole. I've learned that no one can take that from you, not if you don't let them. The creek ripples and I smile, my reflection blurred but clear enough. I stand brushing dirt from my jeans and head back to the porch, the hammer left by the barn. The stars are starting to prick the sky, each one a quiet promise. I've spent too long chasing approval, but here under this wide Ohio night, I know I'm enough. Not because of what I've built, but because of who I am, scarred strong and still growing. That's the lesson I carry now. Your value isn't in their eyes, but in the life you choose to live. What's a moment that made you realize your own worth? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join me for more. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone finding their way. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to healing, to growing, to being enough just as you are.